Okay, it's very, very nice to be back after such a long break. And
Where are you?
I was upstate. And probably be appropriate to say before we get started to ask the Abish to bench us that we should understand the Mamorim and that we should do what the Mamorim say, that the Abish should give us that slach in this year, that we should understand the Mamorim and that we should live according to the way the Mamorim tell us to live. So today we are going to begin a Maimer that the Rebbe said on Chai Elul and had published in honor of Chai Elul. Chai Elul is the day that the Baal Shem Tov was born in the year Nachas Tov Nun Ches, which was, I believe, 325 years ago, approximately. And the Alter Rebbe was born in Shnas Kahas, Tov Kofei, which was 278 years ago, if my math is correct. So it was a Wednesday, and on this day, the lashon that said is Shabai Nitlu Hamaeres. On Wednesdays, when the Eibishter hung the sun and the moon in the sky, in the night sky, or in the day sky for the sun, and the two lights, the two luminaries, the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe were both born on a Wednesday, Chai Elul. And this Maimer was said in honor of that day, and it's related to that day. In Tafshin Lamed Gimmel, the Rebbe said this Maimer. So let's start the Maimer. It says in the Haftarah on Shabbos Parshas Kisavik, Kumi Oiri Kiva Orech. The Eibishter is talking to Yidden. The Rebbe teaches this pasuk according to the Medrash. With the Eibishter tells the Yidden, Kumi Oiri, rise and shine, Kiva Orech, because your light has come. In other words, for you to rise and shine, you have to have some light within you. And the Eibishter is telling the Yidden that your light has come and has arrived, and therefore now it's the time for you to shine and to give light. The reason why you can now shine is because your light has come. So the Eibishter tells the Yidden, since your light has already come, now is the time that you have to get up and give light. So the Rebbe asks that we see over here two things. We see the light that the Yidden themselves give. Kumi Oiri, this is the light that the Yidden themselves give. And Orech, the light that the Yidden have, their own light. So what is the idea of these two lights? The Oir of the Yidden that they shine to others, and the Oir, the light that the Yidden have. This Maimer is a very geschmack Maimer, by the way. There's sometimes you might get confused. I know that I was confused for a while, and this Maimer really clarifies one of the fundamental ideas and questions that you could have. Why do you have a Yid and Torah? In other words, what do I mean, why do you have a Yid and Torah? What's the role of a Yid, and what's the role of Torah? It can get very confusing sometimes, especially in light of the Torah of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov explains that the Yidden are of the highest level. There's nothing that's higher than a Yid. A Yid's connection to the Eibishter is always unbreakable, unshakable. The Alter Rebbe Tanya talks about Mesiras Nefesh. There's nothing, and a Yid could always do tshuva, even if he transgresses and breaks the laws of Torah. A Yid who his entire life doesn't live according to Torah, entire life, and does the most terrible averis, like Elazar ben Durdayu, the Alter Rebbe brings Negeres HaTshuva, or is Negeres HaKodesh? I think in Negeres HaTshuva. And in 1 second, he does tshuva. And now he's whole and complete. So is Torah important or is Torah not important? Are mitzvahs important or are they not important? You say in the pasuk, you are children to the Eibishter. No, you're a child to the Eibishter, so what do you need to Torah for? That's one view. Then you can take it to the other extreme, you could say no. You could say a Yid, that Torah is everything. Torah is the Tzena v'chachmas shel Kadosh Baruch Hu. Torah is where the Eibishter tells us what he wants us to do, how he wants us to be. And without that, you're nothing. And l'chora, both of them, there's a point in both of them. And the question is, which one is it? And how does it work? What role exactly does a Yid play? What is it that a Yid has, and what role does Torah play? And you can ask the same question about a neshama and a guf. A person, the Eibishter made us in a way that we're made up of two parts. We're comprised of two parts. We have a neshama and we have a guf. Why did the Eibishter make a neshama and a guf? If he wants a guf, there could be a guf on its own. Why do you have to have a neshama also? What has to be our emphasis in serving the Eibishter? Matters of the soul or matters of the body? Are we supposed to ignore our body, view the body as an enemy, and try to break it and try to transcend it, and live only with the neshama? Or are we supposed to say, no, the ikir is about the body? Torah was given to physical yidden. We're supposed to live here in the physical world as human beings. The neshama only plays a secondary role to help so that the body can live. What exactly is going on? What's the place of these things? These are very basic and fundamental questions. And in this Maimer, the Rebbe makes a seder out of all of that. So it's a very Geschmack Maimer. Along the way, there's also a lot of Geschmack HaSkola. A lot of it is very edel and akudis, is very fine, refined points, very subtle points that are hard to truly grasp, to truly wrap our minds around, and not really appropriate for the format of this year. The concepts that are just mentioned and touched on in this Maimer, so there are hemshechim that are dedicated to explain each one, but Bezos Hashem will be able to understand enough to get the flow of the Maimer and understand how it leads to the answers to the two questions that we had before. What's the role of Torah and the Yid, and what's the role of the body, the neshama, and the soul, the guf? The neshama, the soul, and the body, the guf. Okay, so let's see. So the Rebbe begins now his Maimer by bringing down a medrash. Yuvens al pima deisa b'yalkut will be able to understand these two ideas: the light of the Yidden, that they shine, and the light that the Yidden have for themselves. We'll be able to understand that by bringing down a medrash. It says in Yalkut, Shemini, Amri Yisrael Fnei Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Yidden told the Eibishter, Asinu l'cha meneira b'mei Moshe v'kavsa. We went with great fanfare. He told us to make a mishkan, and the mishkan, he said, we have to have a meneira. We went, we donated our gold, and there was a whole hoo-ha, and then there was the Chanukas HaMishkan. Everything was beautiful, and then we lit the meneira, and everything was great. And then what happened? It didn't last. Eventually, we lost the meneira of the Mishkan. I'm not sure historically when it was. It may have been when Mishkan Shili was destroyed. I believe in Mishkan Shili they used the kalim from Mishkan Moshe. The Yeri is on top for sure. I'm not sure about the rest of it. But Al Kolpanim, it was eventually destroyed. And so to b'mei Shleima, again, we made for you a meneira. Everything was beautiful and shining and bright. And then V'kavsa, the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, and we lost that meneira. So listen to what the Yidden tell the Eibishter. Mikan ve'elach, from here on and going forward, ein anu mamtinin ela la'orecha. We're done with making our meneiros. We're not making our meneiros. We're waiting for your light. We're waiting for your light. And we'll finish learning. I mean, it's a bit. It's a bit of a. I have trouble understanding this medrash because it sounds like what the Yidden are telling the Eibishter is you told us to make a meneira. We have a mitzvah to make a meneira. But you know what? It's not working out, and therefore we're resigning. We're resigning. We're done. We're not. That's what it sounds like. It almost sounds like what many of us feel like saying now, even though the Rebbe tells us we can't say it and we can't take this approach, which is we're trying so hard to bring Mashiach, and we're working and we're doing everything we could. And Sachakal, what do you want from us? We're human beings. We're flawed human beings, and you're not making us all rich with the health and all the blessings that we need. And then you're asking us to bring Mashiach. We're ready. We're doing our best. We're ready. But it's on you. It's the Eibishter's problem. It's a sentiment that I have many times. I know that it's incorrect, and you have to act the opposite of that sentiment. The Rebbe tells us it's up to us. It's up to us. The Rebbe tells us that we have to do whatever we could do. We have to do whatever we could do. But it sounds like this medrash is giving credence, is supporting such a way of thinking. So I don't understand the nakud of the medrash. But the Yidden tell the Eibishter, we're not making any more meneiros. Now it's on you. We're putting the ball back in your court. About Kapanim, that's what the medrash says. Maybe one day we'll understand the true depth and the true meaning of this medrash. So the medrash continues and quotes the pasuk that we spoke about in the beginning of the Maimer. So the Yidden tell the Eibishter, we're going to wait for your light, and then we'll have a meneira that will be everlasting. Like it says in the pasuk, the Yidden tell the Eibishter this pasuk that with you, Eibishter, is the source of all life, and with your light, that's how we're going to have light. We're not going to make our own light anymore. We're not going to make our own menorahs. We're going to wait for Ba'echa. We're going to wait for your light, and then we'll have a menorah. And then the Eibishter responds to the Yidden, Kumi Eiri Kiva Orech. The Eibishter tells the Yidden, you were waiting for my light to come to you, and then you'll have a menorah, then you'll be able to shine. So Kumi Eiri, come and shine Kiva Orech, because your light has come. In other words, I'm giving you this light that you requested of me. I'm answering you. I'm giving it to you. So the Medrash teaches Kiva Orech to be the Eir of the Eibishter. The Yidden were asking Hashem for his light, and the Eibishter gives it to them. And now it's time for them to light. But in the Maimer, the Rebbe teaches Kiva Orech, that Orech is not the light that the Eibishter gives, it's also the Eir of the Yidden. Narvas, it's two different lights in the Yidden. From this, that the Medrash compares the two psukim, Kumi Eiri Kiva Orech, as the words of the Yidden to the Eibishter. And in this he says, Kumi Eiri Kiva Orech, which is the words of the Eibishter to the Yidden. To the other words of the pasuk, which are the words of the Yidden to the Eibishter, that in your light we'll see light. So we can understand that the two concepts and ideas which are on the pasuk Kumi Eiri Kiva Orech, which is the Dibra Maskul of our Maimer, are similar to the two concepts in the other pasuk in the Medrash, which is that in your light, Eibishter, we will see light. So now the whole rest of the Maimer is going to go around the other pasuk, which the other pasuk is a Dibra Maskil of the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimer that the Frierdiker Rebbe said or gave to publish in Tafshin, which was already in America. Tafshin says after Tesadar, after the Frierdiker Rebbe arrived in America, so it's an American Maimer. And now we're going to get into the pasuk of Kiba Orech Nira Akim Chamakar Ba Orech Nira. So let's see what the Frierdiker Rebbe says about that pasuk. The Yuvans will be able to understand these concepts of Ba'er Chanira Eir and Kumi Eiri Kiva Orech. These two lights. In both cases, we mentioned two lights, Ba'er Chanira Eir and Kumi Eiri Kiva Orech. So we'll be able to understand what these two lights are and the connection between them. The hekta Mashem Avayt, by first introducing what the Frierdiker Rebbe explains in his Maimer on the pasuk which is the second pasuk that the Medrash brings, in Yaakov Shimoni he quotes it, that the Frierdiker Rebbe says about this pasuk, that in this pasuk you have four distinct concepts. Right, let's touch the pasuk again. Like the Frierdiker Rebbe touches it so beautifully in his Maimer, mit dir Rebbeinu Shalom is der Qual von Leben. With you, Eibishter, is the well of life. You are the source of all life. In your light, we will see light. So you have over here, the Frierdiker Rebbe says actually four distinct concepts. You have Chaim, you have life itself, then you have Mekor Chaim, you have the source of life, and then you have Orech, your light, the Oir and light. These four distinct concepts. The Frierdiker Rebbe teaches these four concepts as follows in the pasuk. The Frierdiker Rebbe says that these four ideas and themes are in a seder from lower to higher, and the Frierdiker Rebbe explains as follows: Chaim. What do we mean? What is the pasuk referencing when the pasuk says Chaim? This is the godly life that encloses itself, embodies itself in the worlds, which in Chassidus we call Mamalik Olam, the light of Elikus and the life of Elikus, which fills the worlds. Why is it called Chaim Lashon Rabim in the plural? Because the life that encloses itself and becomes embodied in the worlds is, and in all the creations, is separate in many different parts. It's fragmented, and each creation according to its level. Right? So in Chassidus Bichlal, it's explained that you have the idea of Mamalik Kolalmin, and you have the idea of Seviv Kolalmin. To touch it literally means you have the light that fills the worlds, that comes within the worlds and fills them, and you have the light that surrounds the worlds. Goes like in a circle, it surrounds them. It doesn't go within them. The Alter Rebbe already in Tanya explains that when we say that it surrounds the worlds, doesn't mean chas v'shalom that the Eibishter's light doesn't come into the world, right? There's a lot of people who learn Kabbalah and without proper understanding, and they like to think that they understand it and they take it in the wrong ways. There's a big movement in that. So you might understand Seviv Kolam, that it surrounds the world. Chas v'shalom, the Eibishter's light isn't in the world. The only light of the Eibishter that is a more distant light from the Eibishter. The light of Mamala, that came into the worlds. So Alter Rebbe says Chas v'shalom. Hashem is one. And the Eibishter's light of Seviv Kalaman is also in the world. So if the light of Mamala Kalaman fills the worlds, and the light of Seviv Kalaman fills the worlds, then why do we call one Mamala that it fills and another one Seviv that it surrounds? So Alter Rebbe says that he's teaching us over here a concept, an idea. When we say that it fills the worlds, we mean to say that the light is on a lower level where it comes measured to the amount that corresponds to what the worlds can stand, can take, can receive. In other words, it's a light that was so restricted and so drawn down and so transformed that it can rest within this physical world. In other words, you see a plant growing. 1 week it's this high, the next week it's that high. It keeps growing higher. That growth comes from the life that's in it. In other words, a chayas aliki came all the way down to the level where it can bring growth to a physical plant. And then you see life in animals, and you see life lahavdil in people. And you see the fact that stones exist. You see that various different things have life in them. You feel the heat of the sun. Various different things have life in them. The energy, the life that the Eibishter gave to the sun cannot be compared at all to the energy and life that the Eibishter gave to the moon. The moon on its own doesn't shine. It's a hard stone. And the sun is something full of movement and motion and energy. It's a completely different level of life that comes into each one. And this life becomes very separate. Each molecule in the world, each atom and each subatomic particle has its own life within it. And each one according to its inyan, the energy level and the quality of it and its type and its smell and its flavor. Everything is different based according to where the life comes. So it's the Eidaliki that Pashat came down and turned into billions upon trillions. You can't really calculate how much different levels of life came into the world, and each one just a teeny drop of life ended up in a teeny speck of the universe. So that's the idea of Mamale. It comes down into each individual creation as it is and gives it life. Seviv Kalaman also comes to all of these same places, but it comes as one single life and as one single light. It just comes, it's everywhere and every place the same thing to everyone. It doesn't come and divide itself and distinguish itself and lower itself and measure itself in accordance with each place that it's coming to. And that's why we can't perceive it. And that's why it's almost as if it ignores the worlds. And that's why we call it surrounds the worlds. It's not something we could internalize. It's not something we can integrate with our understanding, with our feeling, with our realm of ideas and knowledge that we have, concepts that exist within what we know. It's something that's beyond us. And that's why it's called Seviv. It surrounds. It's far away. It's distant. So the Vedic Rebbe says that the first level that we have in this pasuk is Chaim, is life, is this level of life that came down into this physical world. In other words, it's the lowest level of Elikus. It's the lowest level of godly energy that comes to give light to the world. And then you have the next level up, Mekayr Chaim, the source of life, Hu Eira Seviv Kalam. This already is the light of Seviv Kalam. So this light is of a much higher level because it didn't lower itself and didn't measure itself and didn't constrain itself to the lowly worlds. It remained as whatever it is, as a light of Elikus. And that's already a much higher level. It's incomparably higher. It's a whole other league. It's a whole other playing field. And this is the light of Seviv Kalam. And then he says there's a third level, which is even higher, which is Orech. And Orech, he says, Hu Teira. Like we see, the pasuk calls Teira Orech. The pasuk calls Teira light. So Orech is already the level of Teira, Shalamayla Gami Seviv, which is already higher than the level of Seviv Kalam. And then you have the final level, the ultimate level Oir, ki ba'oircha nira oir, the final level of ha'oir shenira alidei oircha hu l'mayla gam me'oircha. The light that can be seen through oircha, through your light, is even higher than the light. Until the level of oircha is nothing more than a preparation for the level of oir that we can see through the level of oircha. So it's a little strange by us. We don't. I couldn't think of a concept, and I never learned an idea that would help us understand that you see one light through another light. Right? We're accustomed in this world that light, you don't need other lights just to be able to see it. If it's light, you see it. It's things that are not light that you have to have light so that you could see those things. But light you could see on its own. But there's obviously there's this idea, which the pastors there must be a muscle for in this world also, of light that you cannot perceive unless you have another light. There's another light, and this light gives you the ability to see to see something else, to see the other light. So he says, Teda is light, Teda is Oir, and that gives you the ability to see this other light, which is termed Oir. Okay, so we have four madrigas. We have the level of Chaim, which from the fact that it gives life to the entire universe, from the beginning of time to the end of time, we can understand that it's a very high madriga, it's a very big madriga. But this, however, when it comes to the madrigas and likus, it's the lowest levels. Even the fact that it gives life to all of the malachim and to all of the spiritual worlds, but it's the lowest level. Then we have a level that's completely beyond that. And that level is the light of Seviv Kalman. And then again, we have a level that's completely beyond that. And that's the light of Teira, the light of Teira. And then again, we jump again, and we have a light that's even beyond the level of the light of Teira, and that's the level of Eir. That's the light of Eir. So we have over here four different levels, and the Maimon is going to go around these four concepts. So it's worthwhile to try to remember this pasuk that there's Chaim and Mekoir Chaim, and there's Eircha and there's Eir. Will help to keep track of what's going on in the Maimon. Okay, and Devin's going to explain now. We're going to discuss the next levels that we didn't discuss yet, the levels of Seviv and then Eircha and then Eir in turn. Devin's going to go through each one. And Rebbe said that the light of Eir is so much higher than Eircha, than the light of Teira, that Eircha is considered to be merely a preparation, an introduction, something that leads you to the light of Eir. That's how high the light of Eir is. So in order to be able to fully appreciate the greatness of the level of Eir, let's first try to understand just what's included in the level of Eircha. In order to be able to understand, we're going to go, in order to understand the greatness of the level of Eircha, which is only a preparation to Eir. So first let's understand what's the greatness of the level of Mekoir Chaim. Then we'll already understand just how high the level of Eircha is, and could you imagine how much higher the level of Eir is? Okay, so we're living over here in this world. What do we perceive? And even that barely perceive. We barely perceive the light of Memalik Almin. Yeah, the Rebbe brings quite a few times. The Chassidus is brought, and the Rebbe mentions it quite a few times. I think it's the Akedah. I don't know. It's in one of the Sifri Kabbalah that you could see that for the light of Memalik Almin, you don't have to have Torah tell you about it. That you could perceive the energy of the Eibishter, the Chayas Aliki in this world, without necessarily, in other words, what he's saying is not something that you don't need to Torah. What he's saying is that it's apparent in the world itself. And he says how you could see it from the existence of the celestial objects, from the galaxies and from the stars and from the sun, and their movement and their constant energy. And you understand that it doesn't come from nowhere. Where was energy created from? Where does all of this come from? And you see it continuously. You look up in the sky and you see it. It's apparent in front of you that there's obviously some kind of energy that's from a higher source, in other words, from a godly source in this world. So we're living in that reality where we know and we can perceive that there's a Getlecha light. However, we know nothing about it. We know nothing about it. Just
what is the word?
Getlecha, godly.
Okay. Oh,
Getlecha, godly. In other words, just like every single one of us knows that we have a neshama. Yeah. We have a neshama, we have a soul. We sense it, we feel it in our life, in our feelings, in our thoughts. in our desires and our yearnings and the things that we want. We feel the soul and everything. We feel the life of the soul. Forget about getting philosophical. We must feel the life of the soul in our body. However, if I were to ask any one of us who knows that we have a soul, without a doubt, and feels the soul within us, what is a soul? What's an neshama? We can't answer. We can't answer. Yeah? What does Yitzchak Piton? You know Yitzchak Piton, Raya Mehemna? So he has a song, "O soul, you are the source of light, so full of emotion, yet no one knows what you are." It's Chassidus. He learned Chassidus, and he's singing about the Chassidus. You feel the neshama is full of things, but no one knows what's a neshama. It's part of me. I sense it every moment. I couldn't begin to tell you what's a neshama. So the same thing, l'chura. The same thing, l'chura, with the chayes aliki that's in the world, in the malakal almin. We know that it's there. We can perceive it. We can see it, but we can't tell you what it is. In other words, we don't truly know it, and that's the world that we're locked in, that we're trapped in, that we live in. And the Rebbe says that not only is there this level of light that you can truly know, there's also a level of light beyond that, which is the light of Seviv. And beyond that, there's the light of Ba'ircha. And beyond that, there's the light of Eir. And the Rebbe is going to show us how, all the way at the end of the Maimon, the Rebbe is going to point out to us that we can connect to every single one of these levels until the ultimate level of Eir. And that we can do it now in the world today. In other words, the Rebbe is showing us how to live with things that are way, way beyond what we think we can and what's part of our experience, without learning the depth and truth and beauty of Torah, especially the way it's explained to us in Chassidus. Okay, so let's begin. In order to explain to us, in order for us to understand the level and the greatness of Orech, which we said before is Torah, which through that we'll be able to see the greatness of the level of Orech, which we see through Orech. So Yuvan Zebehektim. First, let's understand. Let's first understand the level of Makar Chaim, which we said is Seviv Kalalmin, and then we'll work our way up to Orech and then to Orech. That there are two explanations in this. Why do we call it Makar Chaim? Why do we call it the source of life? So I mentioned before that the Frierdiker Rebbe teaches this pasuk that Makar Chaim, that Duri Ben Shalom, Rebbe brings it in the end of the Maimer. Mit dir Ben Shalom is der Kval from Levin. It's the second to the last page on the bottom. Mit dir Ben Shalom is der Kval from Levin. With you, Abish, that is the well of life. What's a well, pastors? Yeah, none of us. I don't know if any of us ever saw a well. I know some.
Well, yeah.
When the Frierdiker Rebbe wants to teach the words Makar Chaim, which he says is the idea of Seviv Kamen, he teaches Makar, the source. He teaches it as a well, a well. I actually have a. Ganesh Montreal had a well. A well, but a well with where all you see on the top is the well with a bucket, the proper well. I have a relative who lives in Pomona, and he said that in his house there's a real well. You know, like you said to me with the bucket.
You could dig.
Majeski. What's that?
You could dig.
You could dig. I remember.
Not in the city,
You
but
go to the water table.
in the suburbs, you could dig by your house and get a well, and you don't pay water.
Absolutely. Yes.
And you don't pay water.
You pay sewer.
But then you have to treat it and clean it.
No.
Oh, you don't
You
have to
clean it.
Oh, really?
It's coming straight from
It's
the
coming straight from there.
I'm touched.
Did you ever see it? A few places. We're not used to it. But in the olden days, it was a very simple thing. There was water all over town.
We have one by Summer 7.
Yeah. But that's operated by a pump, no?
But still, they dug down.
They dug down. Yeah, they dug down. Yeah. Akopanim. So there's a well. There's water all over the town, right? In every house, you had the well, the water carrier. Either went down to the river or went to the wells. We're talking about a well over here, so we'll stick with the well. He drew the water out of the well, put it into his buckets, or loaded it up onto his wagon, and then he distributed it all over town. And now everybody in their house, they had a wash basin. They always say it's a wash basin, because in the olden days they filled up a basin with water, and you washed your hands, you washed your face.
You didn't have running water.
You didn't have running water, and you kept reusing that water. You washed your hands once in it, and then they got dirty. You washed them again, and until eventually the water became so dirty that you had to replace it. And you had water that you set aside for drinking and water to feed the animals. So you have water all over the town. Where did all of this water come from? It came from the well. So the well is the source for all of this water. In the well, you have the water in its natural place. Over there, you have an unlimited, or relatively speaking, you have an unlimited amount of water, and all of the water that later on is spread out by the water carrier all over town. And within every house, you put it in different places in the house. Over here for the animals, over here for drinking, over here for baking, over here for washing. All of that water was in one place. It was in the well. In other words, it was a more simple, concentrated, pure type of existence. And that's a very rudimentary idea to try to think of. It's a market. It's the source for things. In other words, if it's not the thing itself, the way it came out later, it's not the water in the cup. But if you go look in the source, if you go look in the well, you'll see water. Let's see how it works out. The first explanation in Seviv Kalalman and Mekoyer Chaim is that even though we say that it's beyond the level of Memalek Kalalman, that it's beyond the Elamis, still we say that it's a source, it's a well of life for the Elamis. Why? Even the light of Seviv Kalalman, since it's only a ray of light that comes from the Eibishter, but it's not Atzmus, it's not the Eibishter himself, it's a ray of light. So therefore, Humakir al Kolpanim, and I didn't type this right, just by the way. It's hard to say that because it's a ray of light, therefore it's a source. But al Kolpanim, we'll leave it at that. Like I said, these are very deep ideas in Chassidus that would take separate shiurim and separate preparation for each one to explain properly. But for now, let's just call that it's the source of the world. So therefore, the Eira Seifam, because we call it the source of the world, therefore, we must say that it's on a lower level. Because it's only a ha'ara, it's only a ray of light that came from the Eibishter. It's not something higher than that. Therefore, and therefore, it's also a makar for the life that comes into the worlds. You can draw a direct line from the Eir HaSeviv Kol Almin to the Eir that rests and is enclosed within this world. So the Eir HaSeviv Kol Almin, on the one hand, we say that it's completely apart from this world, but because it serves as the well, as the source from which life is drawn for this world, so therefore it actually has relatively speaking, a connection to this world. So in what sense is it completely apart from this world? It's completely apart from this world in the sense that it stands on a much higher level. It's of a different quality completely. It's not so mitzumtzum, it's not so constrained, it's not so fragmented, it's not so separated into many different things. It was never actually embodied and enclosed into physicality and into creations, even spiritual creations. It never was. However, you look over there, you say, this same thing, I could later take it down and draw it down into spiritual creations and into physical creations, and I could fragment it and I could take it apart. So in one way, it's beyond this world because it wasn't yet drawn down into this world. But on the other hand, because it can be drawn down into this world, and because in matter of fact, it serves as a source that eventually is in fact drawn down into this world. So therefore, we understand that you can't call it completely disconnected and completely beyond and higher than the existence of this world and the lowly existence of this world, and comparatively speaking, even than the relatively low existence of the Ilam Yisrael. So it still has a connection to this world.
Yeah.
That's one way of viewing this idea that it's the source of life. In other words, we view it properly as a well, just like from a well you draw out the water. From this place we draw out the light for the world. Then you have an entirely other way of looking on Mekoyer Chaim. What does it mean that it's the source of life? What's the other way of looking? So Mekoyer Chaim, another way of looking at it is that Mekoyer Chaim, the source of life, no, we're talking about a light that's beferish, that's clearly higher than even being a source for the world. If it's higher than being a source of the world, then why are you calling it Mekoyer Chaim? Why are you calling it a source for the world? Because the life came from it. The life came from it. So it came from it, but we're not calling it a source. The life of the world didn't come from itself. It came from somewhere. So in Chassidus, when you use the word source, you're referring to a specific concept and idea. And that's what he's saying over here, is that there's two things that you can mean when you say it's the source. So when you say the word source, you have to say, how do you mean it's the source? One way to say it's the source is that it came from it. In other words, that you could find it. Well, I'll skip trying to say it to bring it down into one word. I'll just try to explain the concept that he's saying over here. When you say that one thing is the source for another thing, let's go back to the example of the well. You say that the well is the source for all of the water that's in the town. So what does that mean? That means when you look in the well, what are you going to see? You're going to see water. When you say that someplace or something is the source of something, it means that if you look in it, you'll find the same exact thing. We say that Seviv Kol Almin is Mekoir Chaim, is the source of life for the world. What we're saying is to look at the life in the world. If you look in Seviv Kol Almin, you'll find that same life. The same life that you find in the world, you'll also find it in Seviv Kol Almin. That's one way of saying it. You say that a spring is the source of the river, so look at the river. What is it? Observe it. Test it. What is it? You'll say it's water. So you'll say, the spring, if I look in the spring, I'm sure I'll find water also. That's one way that you can mean that it's the source of life. Then you can say another thing. When I say it's the source of something, if you look at it, you're not going to find it anywhere in its source. And therefore, I'm not calling it its source. The only reason I'm calling it its source is in the sense that it came from there. What's the mashal that's given for this in Chassidus? The mashal that's given for this in Chassidus is a flintstone. A stone. You take one stone, the flintstone, and you strike it against the other stone, you'll get a spark. If you look in the stone and take it apart and examine it under a microscope and look at it from every which angle and mix it with any chemical, do whatever you want to it, you'll never find a spark in it. There's no spark in it. So why do we say that the spark came from the flintstone? Because it didn't come from itself. It came from its, but it doesn't mean that it's in it. So when you say that something came from something, it can mean one of two things. Either that it's in its source already, like the water that's in the well or the water that's in the spring, and it only comes out of its source, the same thing that was in it. Or you say, no, something entirely new that never existed in the source before now came about. For example, the spark that comes out of the flintstone is not something that you'll find in the stone. There's nothing, the Tzura Chalamish, there's nothing in the stone at all. What's the difference? What's the difference between Negeli and Yaneinu? In one case, we say that the source is on the same level of the things that come out of the source, and that's why it serves as the source. In the other case, in the case of the flintstone, we don't say it's of the same level of the spark that comes out of it. It has nothing to do with it. It's a different type of thing completely. It's just that something came out of it. We don't associate the thing that came out of it with the thing itself. We're going to have to leave it at that. We're going to have to leave it at that. But taking it to the terminology of Chassidus, to the terminology of the Maimer, and the ideas and the concept of the Maimer, the Eibishter Chas v'Shalom, to say on the Eibishter that the Eibishter is a source for the worlds. When you say that the Eibishter is a source for the worlds, what you're saying is that the Eibishter is somewhat, in some way, like the worlds. He's like the worlds. The worlds came from him. If he could make the worlds, it's like, not like that. But if he made the worlds, then you would think, Chas v'Shalom, that he has within him, metals and chemicals and all of the different physical properties that make up the world and the physical energy in the world. And therefore, the Eibishter, since he has all of these things, was able to make the world, Chas v'Shalom, to say that. Mm-hmm. Of course, we know it all comes from him, but to say that the Eibishter is corporeal, is made up of bodily, of physical things, that Rambam explains that logically why you can't even say such a thing. And
It all
Kamuv,
comes from him, or it's all made by him.
that's a good way of saying it. I like those words. You could say it's made by him, or you could say comes. When you say it comes from him, you mean to say it's within him somewhere. He has those things. He has those qualities, and that you can't say. When you say it's made by him, then you don't mean to say that he actually has those things. It's just that it wasn't made by itself. It's sustained and created by him only, so it's made by him. Yeah, that's a nice way of saying it. It's a nice way of saying it. So you have like this. At what point in the Chayes Eliki, by the Eibush himself, we all understand that even though everything comes from him, is made by him, you can't call him the source of the world because there's nothing like him inside the world. At what point, there's nothing like the world inside of him. He's not made up of physical things. He's not made up of spiritual things. He's not made up of anything at all. It's pshittus. Tachlis of pshittus. Pashut b'tachlis of pshittus. But the Eibush gives a light, and this light becomes constrained and restricted and limited and transformed and from one form to another form until it's lowered enough to a point where you say now we can call it the source of the world in the sense that the life of the world exists within it. Okay? So when you're saying that the well is the source for all of the water that's in the city, what do you mean to say? You mean to say that the well is greater than any individual cup of water, than any individual wash basin that you'll find anywhere in the city. If the well is the one that gave all of that water, it's obviously much greater than any of the water that you'll see there. However, how much greater is it? It's very limited how much greater it is, because in the end of the world, this is water and that's water. So this is water on a greater way, in a greater extent, in its pure state, in its undivided state, but it's water. And that's what you could mean when you say Seviv Kalalmin, you could mean that. Or when you say Seviv Kalalmin, you could mean no, the light is completely beyond anything like that. It's like the spark that comes out of the Flintstone. Just like you look in the Flintstone, you won't find it. So too, the light of Seviv Kalalmin is so beyond the worlds that if you as deep and as hard as you look in the area of Seviv Kalalmin, you won't find anything like these worlds. You won't find anything like the life of these worlds. In other words, Seviv Kalalmin is completely beyond anything like this world. And that's
nevertheless, you say
So
this
that's
called
the
the
mashal. That's
Kalam.
the mashal of the.
There's a shaykhs.
Oh, very good. To be seen, we'll get to that next week. I assume we'll get to it. There you make a good point. That yes, that's the muscle of Flintstone where the spark is made by the rocks, but we don't mean to say that the rocks have within them a spark. You won't find the spark anywhere. So, and we'll skip the brackets. I said by heart, more or less. Okay, we'll read the words inside without explanation. That the Eibster is called the rock of our life. That when we say tzur, when we say the rock of our life, we mean to say that he is the source and the root for all of the sources of existences. When we say that, we don't mean to say that the Eibster can be considered a source for the creations, for existences, but rather that everything was made by him, came from him, but not that he's a source for it. And this is why the lashon in the pasuk is imcha meker chayim. And all of this, just to be clear, is included in imcha meker chayim. Remember, we said there's 4 levels. So both of these levels in Seviv Kalalmin are included in meker chayim. And Orech is even beyond that, and Orech is beyond that. And this is why the pasuk uses the words "Kimcha Meker Chaim." The word "imcha," you have 2 explanations. What do you mean when you say that something is with you? With you, Eibishter is the source of life. What do you mean to say that it's with you? You're emphasizing when you say "imcha," it's not you. It's not Eibishter. It's something separate from you. It's something that's with you, but it's not you. Something that's extra and completely bottled, secondary, very good to you. That's one way. That's one thing you can mean when you say it's imcha. It's not you. It's separate from you. Or you can emphasize something else. That it's not something that it's on its own. It's imcha. It's something that remains one and connected to the Eibishter. Unified and one in a state of oneness with the Eibishter. No. We're calling it something. We're giving it a name. We're calling it imcha, but you can't call it separate. We can't call it separate. Well, there maskas b'medish. This is a beautiful medish. It says in the pasuk in Kesef Talves Ami that if you will lend to my nation, in other words, to a poor yid, if you will lend him money, and of course do it interest free, that's the whole point. You're not making money off of him. You're giving him a loan for the sake of giving a yid a loan. So he says in the medicine Kesef Talve, if you'll do it this way, at imi, you will be with me. Ma ani, just like I am eternal. I never have a downfall. Chas v'shalom. Afata, so too you will never have a downfall. So in other words, what does the pasuk mean when it says ami? When it says imi? The way the Medrash teaches it as imi, with me, that you are one with the Eibishter. Just like the Eibishter is forever, you will also never have a downfall. So imi means that you're one with him. Says that. So these two ways of understanding the word imcha correspond to the two ways of understanding Mekor Chaim. When we say that Mekor Chaim means that it's a source, just like the well is a source for all the water that you have in the town. So if that's how we understand Mekor Chaim, so how are we supposed to teach imcha? That imcha is something that's nothing close to the Eibishter. It's not even one with the Eibishter. It's tafel ubatel. It's something very distant from the Eibishter. However, in the way that we say that Mekor Chaim means not that it's actually a source like a well, you could see the water in the well or you could see the water in the spring, but rather that it's made by it. It came from it in some sort of way. That's all we mean to say with that, but not that you'll find it in its source. So in that case, if that's what we're talking about when we say Mekor Chaim, so which level of Elokus are we talking about? What do we mean when we say imcha, that it's with you? We're saying that all life comes from a much higher level in the likus, from a level that you have to say, and it's only imcha. It's nothing other than something that's completely in a state of oneness and unified with the Eibishter. Okay?
Also, it's immutability.
Ki imcha Hashem hachesed. L'chora.
It's all coming from.
Yeah, but over here he doesn't have. There he doesn't.
Ability that you.
Now I understand what you're saying. So an ability, even to say that, you get into trouble. You're giving it an association. You're describing the Eibishter as having some sort of. You have the. When you say that he has the ability to do it, you could mean saying it in two ways. You could be saying that it's within his powers to do it, that it's one of the things that he could do. For example, you're a musician, so it's within your ability to play music. This is something that's within you. Or you could say it's within your ability because you can't say that it's not. Could you say that the Eibishter can't not create the worlds? Of course he could create the worlds if he wants. So you say that it's within the Eibishter's ability because it's impossible to say that he can't create the worlds. You understand? In one way, we're positively identifying it as one of your qualities, as one of your characteristics. This is one of the things that describe you. In the other way, we're saying it doesn't describe you, it doesn't talk to you at all. It's just that you can't say that he can't create it. So okay, so it's within his ability to create
We're
it.
saying that there's nothing you couldn't do.
Yeah, so that's already that's now you're already reaching higher.
Okay.
You're not describing him as it, but you're saying that everything can come from him, that anything can come from him, and everything must come from him. Okay, Mitzvah Hashem next week to be continued.
Can drive, create, or walk, but you can't lift. That's a famous